Morena koutou from Ōtautahi. Ko Jennifer Leigh aho, he kai mahi aho ki ACE Aotearoa me ako Aotearoa, Centre for Tertiary Teaching Excellence. Welcome to you all this Monday morning, and I hope wherever you are, it's a great start to your week. So we have our session this morning. And I'll talk to that shortly, but I am going to invite us to start with a karakia. Me karakia tātou. Whakataka te hou ki te uru, whakataka te hou ki te tonga, kia mākina kina ki uta, kia mātaratara ki tai, e hi aki ana te ata kura, he tio, he huka, he hou, Wonga ti hei Māori ora. I hope it's a lovely day wherever you are. A little bit about me, just a little bit. And many of you may have seen me come across, because I've been around a while, come across me at various things. I am currently the ACE Teaching Standards Advisor for ACE Aotearoa. Um, and I have a background in doing a lot of work in the adult education sector. Currently, I'm the Southern Manager for Ako Aotearoa, but I have had various roles with Arapotama, University, that's Department of Corrections, University of Canterbury, and ARA. So just a little bit there about me, and so you know my background, and much of the work that I do is based on my academic study and, of course, connected to the ACE teaching standards. So do ask more about the ACE teaching standards anytime you'd like to know about those. They are available on the ACE website, and they give you a really clear guidance about how to be the best tutor ever. So there are 17 indicators there, and we're looking at three of the indicators today in this session. This session, which you can see, is based on peer feedback and self-reflection. So I invite you to introduce yourself. It's always nice to know where you are in the country and your role. Also, today I'm interested in a question about you and your learning. So I've asked the question there, please share one thing that helps you learn well. So we'll look at this list later in the session in conjunction with feedback and reflection. But please feel free to write your name, your role, and where you are in the country, but also the one thing that helps you learn well. Okay, so this is referring to the teaching standards. I said that as the advisor for the teaching standards, there'd be each of these online sessions are aligned to the standards. And so today's session is under the heading of practice. And in particular, with the use of personal reflections and problem solving. And the two indicators that I'm looking at today are 7.1, using feedback from communities and learner information to reflect on and evaluate the effectiveness of teaching, as well as 7.2. So that's looking at assisting learners to carefully consider information and ideas to reflect on in their learning. So those two indicators have set the scene for today's session. So here are our contents for the session today. You'll see that we've already had an opportunity to do a brief whakawhanaungatanga, but I'm going to talk first about peer feedback, then I'm going to look briefly at reflective practice and a few models for both of those, and then invite you to do a reflection activity and an evaluation at the end. Please be aware that everything that I'm talking about is I'm really only going to touch on. I could give you more information later if you wanted to contact me, and I will put the links in the final final slide so you can follow up for yourself. But within the hour, we're only going to be able to touch on some of these issues. Okay, so the first thing I want to just share with you is about peer feedback and invite you to think about how that works for you when you're teaching the people in your area. Do How do you enact peer feedback? Do you invite peer feedback? Do you give people an opportunity to work together to give each other feedback? What the idea, of course, about peer feedback is it's not just from you as the kayako, the tutor. The idea is that you encourage your learners to give each other feedback on their mahi, on their work. And just like the key value of AKO, AKO, peer feedback is a really great example of AKO, whereby when I'm giving feedback to a colleague, I'm also learning. So it's really a great way of enacting that concept of AKO, that reciprocal process. The other thing about peer feedback is it really helps us. It gives us a chance to grow in confidence because far too many of our adult learners are not confident and have been assessed or given feedback that is problematic or means that they lack in confidence. Of course, it helps us to see where there are areas that we can grow. And the more that we have the opportunity to get peer feedback for ourselves with colleagues or encourage it with our learners, they learn, they can from each other get a diverse perspective, they can see their blind spots, they get lots of different ideas. And what I like is the statement that I found about peer feedback normalizing improvement rather than perfection. So normalizing improvement rather than perfection. I find that one really helpful because it does mean that I can encourage people um, to give really honest feedback and build it up. And I have had the opportunity to do that when I was teaching groups of adults week after week. So it's hard to do in a one-off session if any of you are training people just one-off, one session or two session. But if you have a group of adult learners that you know you can work with over 8 weeks or so, peer feedback is great to start right from the beginning so that they learn and it becomes really normalized and a part of your sessions. Many of you will know these principles of giving feedback, but I just wanted to summarize them together. And there's a couple of other slides, and then you'll have a chance to talk yourself in a breakout room about feedback. As a lot of us know, it's important whenever we give feedback that it's specific. We don't just say, good job, it was great today. We say, I really liked how you divided the group by using this technique. So, as specific as possible. Of course, we're trying to be kind. We're always coming from a place of what really is mana enhancing communication, the bottom point there. But that's being kind and respectful. It's ensuring that we're not talking about the person, we're talking about their work. So that means that regardless of what we think about that person, we're trying to be as professional as possible and give them constructive feedback. We are also working to be as actionable as possible. So it's something that the learner, that the colleague, that our tutor can follow up with. It's not something that's esoteric and they don't know what to do. It's something really actionable that will change the way they teach. Here are a few more feedback techniques, and again, I'm very aware many of you know these. Part of the idea of these sessions is a reminder of how we have sometimes used these techniques, but we sometimes forget. Well, I know I do because I'm so busy doing so many other things and thinking about the neurodiversity issues in the session, thinking about, keeping it visual or auditory or learning different learning styles, keeping it interactive, tons of things I'm thinking about when I'm teaching. But at the same time, I'm also needing to think about feedback. How do people give each other feedback? How do people give me feedback? Some of you may be familiar with that sandwich method, where you have like a good comment, a constructive feedback comment, and then a good comment. I hear people talk about this method all the time, and whilst I don't particularly favour it, I just wanted to share that it is very much a part of the way that people give feedback. And sometimes people find it really helpful. My biggest concern is that people only hear the bit in the sandwich, in other words, the constructive feedback. They don't necessarily hear the bits on the outside, we've become a little bit cynical and we don't listen to the good bits of the sandwich, if you like. So I won't go into detail there, but at times that can work, but I just would caution that try other techniques as well. Use a variety. I like to encourage self-assessment, so where possible, give people a chance to self-assess their learning, and that could be through use of technology in the name of a Kahoot quiz or something like that, where they get a sense of, well, that is competitive, but they also get a sense for themselves. Maybe more of an online quiz or any kind of hard copy quiz as well is an opportunity for them to self-assess, but also self-assess with some guiding questions, some self-reflection, but some way that they can self-assess their own learning. Of course, two-way conversation is probably the best there. So that's, as we talked about earlier, having some good questions, some strong questions that you develop, and you encourage your learners to work with one other person to have a conversation about the learning. Again, this is a technique that I've used when I've worked with people over a period of time. So it does take a little bit of training, like many things, but to give people the space to have the two-way conversation is really valuable. And over time, I've noticed learners are great at coming up with better, more powerful, more useful questions, not just what did you learn today? But, perhaps questions like which particular part did you find useful for your ongoing practice? And again, yeah, so sorry, thank you. Moving on to the use of technology. Uh, Again, I won't go into detail, but just be aware that you can Google search yourself for various tech apps you could use or connections and links to ways that people can self-assess, or you can give yourself feedback, get feedback from others, or um, have use them for conversations with others. We then move on to encourage peer feedback, which I've already talked about, the importance of that, and also in consideration with everything that we're doing, keep it culturally responsive. So that means you work out ways with your group that they feel they can be mana enhancing, so they can be positive in the ways that they give feedback, and they have the time and space to be able to make sure that culturally they feel comfortable with the feedback time that they have for others. Here's some other ideas here. Again, many of these tips you'll know. They aren't new, but they just give you a reminder too that whenever we're giving feedback, we're being as realistic as possible. We're being specific. I've talked about that already. The timeliness one is an important one too. It needs to be immediate. It's not about saving it up for a performance review or saving it up till the end of the course. It's ensuring that you give the feedback right here, right now. Of course, you're being diligent with your feedback. It needs to be an accurate reflection of what you want to say, not just from the top of your head. So, giving it some thought is really important. And ensure that you're as positive as possible in your feedback so people can strengthen the areas that they want to work on. So each of those points I think is really a really good reminder about giving feedback. It's really important with the being specific that you're as concrete as possible. It's observable behavior and that that you're as objective as possible in your comments. You're really direct. So again, some of this you'll know already, but there is more information about this on the pages that I've linked later. Again, here's another feedback model, lots of different feedback models, and I've already talked in previous sessions about some of these, but this one was just another quick one that I found that I liked and reminded me of one that I'd used myself. But again, it's thinking about some learning. So, from the point of view, if I am working as a kayako teaching a session, I might invite a peer to work with, and together we could ask these questions of our session. So, as many of you know, I work with Tai a lot, and often we'll take some time to give each other feedback about these kinds of questions. So, what worked well in the session that we were teaching? We think about improvements, one the ways we could strengthen it, and again, what we could do next time. So again, these questions aren't new, but I quite like that framework of three clear questions. So that's for me as the kayako, the tutor. But if I also can use this for learners that I'm working with, I could invite them just on a post-it note to write what worked well for them, what could strengthen it for them, and what they could do next. So when that can be feedback to me, sorry, but if they were giving feedback to each other for their own learning, I've used this as well, where they've made a note about the session, so what worked well for them. So it's kind of like a metacognitive activity where they think about their learning. So they think back on the session. So what bits helped them with their learning? What bits could strengthen the learning? And what could they do next? So what worked well, maybe in the session there was a piece where if they're a learner that loves verbal learning, the bit that worked well was when they got to talk with each other. Then they might reflect and think about, so what could have strengthened that is I could have made some notes from that discussion, or I could talk to someone after the class to strengthen the learning. And then they could also talk to their peer about what they could do next. Do you want to go for a coffee? Let's talk about this some more, or shall we meet up prior to class next time? So there's multiple ways I've found that these three simple, powerful questions, does that work? Simple and powerful, but you know what I mean. They are powerful questions. I liked it for various scenarios, and I'm sure you've got your own scenarios as well. The other thing that I want to just really reinforce there is if you do get a chance to encourage feedback on a regular basis, I really like these points here to try and co-construct it with learners. And I've said it before, but this isn't going to happen overnight. It is something that happens when you work with learners on a regular basis. So together you brainstorm and think, okay, so feedback, what does it look like? What does respectful feedback like? What does useful feedback look like in our group, not other groups, in our group of learners today? So you co-construct how feedback might happen. You train, if you like, it is training the learner in giving constructive feedback and giving any feedback, and then you set the guidelines for your group. And I really like this approach and think that, when I am in teaching groups for over a series of time, it would be great to make sure that I incorporate this. So the learner has a chance to learn about their learning, they have a chance to learn about what works for them. And equally, they have a chance to think about the learning and consolidate the learning because they get some feedback. So they're growing as well with some of the tasks that they're doing and some of the work that they're learning. And I think it's just a couple more slides before we move on to a chance for you to talk about all of this, because there's possibly quite a few good ideas that you've had yourself. You want to think about, and you think, well, does this work? How does this work? So here's some different tools that I found. I've heard about these, but I haven't actually tried this first one, the 2 stars and a suggestion for end of activity reflections. So there's a bit of crossover, I know, with feedback and reflection here. But this one here is probably more in the reflection area, but it is something that is connected to a tool for feedback as well. So this may be something that you encourage your learners to do at the end of the session. So what was a star? What was, give me 2 stars, give me a suggestion. And then that's the second one, the self-reflection exit ticket. I have done something like this. I have used a container, a kitty or a box, and invited people to do self-reflection feedback on themselves before they leave this was at the university, this before they leave the lecture. So these weren't the questions I used, but they were similar. One thing I improved today, one thing I'm still working on, and one thing I learned from others. Now, whilst I don't really need to know who these responses have come from, I did find it useful to get a sense of what was working in the teaching session for the learners. But importantly, the task of the learner answering these questions gave them opportunity to think about their learning. As I said earlier, that metacognitive approach. Think about how I am learning. What bits have I improved on? What do I need to work on? What did I learn from others that I can incorporate, etc. So just a couple of ideas there that you could incorporate and think about for you, perhaps, particularly for your sessions with ongoing with learners. So here's a chance now for you in your small breakout rooms to talk about effective feedback. So feel free to chat about some of the ideas that I've talked about already. But I liked the idea of you sharing about what the best feedback you've ever received was. Why was it effective? What made it effective? But then having a brief kōrero about what made poor feedback unhelpful too. So a chance to really think about feedback and what works for you and what hasn't worked for you, but also feel free to talk about that as far as you and your learners are concerned too. So talk about it from your perspective, first of all, and then you'll have a chance to talk about that from your learner's perspective. Welcome back, everyone. Anyone want to share something that stood out for you in your breakout room? I know that you don't, I didn't ask you to, but was there anything that you heard and you thought, oh, that would be really good to share with everyone? What?
I guess I'd like to say that, I mean, overall, our group, it's like it has to be specific feedback if it's going to be useful to us.
Right.
That's the key to it, eh? Like we're all open to it. But also, it's like if you've got a class of 30 and one person says, I didn't like it, well, then maybe, it just wasn't, the fit for the day. It's
Yeah.
like you've got to keep open um, to changing. You don't have to change just because, one or two people say something. Yeah.
True. Good point, Kendra. That's always really important. Yeah. Needs to be a pattern.
Yes, I was in the group with two other ladies, and we were talking about how I was talking about how feedback is really important for me in my everyday work. I don't like feedback to be just saying, "Oh, wow, you were so wonderful. You did such a great job," and I know the positive things. I really need the detail to it. So, as a presenter, if I'm presenting for 20 minutes and then I'm finished and someone says, "Oh, you were so good," I'm thinking, I want to know what was very good. Was it where I stood? Was it the content of my PowerPoint? Was it the information that was really useful? Or, what part of the content was useful? So it needs to be a lot more detailed so that it's meaningful feedback. And then I'm able to adjust my presentations to suit. So um, perhaps the audience might not receive the presentation well because of the interpreter or the content or certain things of the presentation. So very good is not helpful feedback for me.
Great. Thanks very much for that feedback, Natasha. And yeah, you certainly highlighted the importance of specific feedback. Yeah. I also noted your point, you're in the chat too about the sandwich technique that even though it's problematic, because it can focus on the negatives, it's also good. It reminds us to say something positive before the negative. Yeah. So that's why the sandwich technique, many people favor it for sure. So we're going to move very quickly now through reflection. It's very similar to feedback. Except it is a process of self-evaluation for ourselves. So feedback is an opportunity to give feedback to others, in peer feedback and feedback if we're asked by our tutor. But reflection is an opportunity for ourselves to think about our practice and our teaching, anything we're doing. And some of you will be familiar with the ideas, of course, about reflective practice. It's really thinking about everything that you do and learning from it so you can improve. That's the idea of it. It's important that it helps with each of us in our own learning going forward. It's often great from the point of view that it gives us some steps, maybe like a plan for the future. And the final comment there, I think, is really important with thinking about reflection is that it's purposefully thinking about it. So it's an aspect of your teaching, of your mahi that you purposely think about. So for me, I might not think about every aspect of how I've taught, but there will be certain bits that I think, oh, that bit needs some new work or more work so I can better improve in the future. So I like this quote. There are a couple of quotes I'm going to refer to. This one from Donald Shawn. It's reflective practices the ability to reflect on one's actions so as to engage in a process of continuous learning. So that's the idea of it, that we don't just and say, yes, I'm the best educator ever. We can keep learning, keep adding in new things. And you'll know those educators, those tutors, those kaiako who do that, who add in something different each time or try something different, or you can see a learning and responding to feedback that they get, but also thinking about their own practice. One of the people who've written a lot about being reflective is Stephen Brookfield from America. And I won't go into the details of this academic study, but it is an area if you want to do some more work about becoming a critically reflective teacher, he's really the guru here. And one of his techniques I have used in, again, my own teaching, and that's known as the critical incident method or critical incident technique. So this is a model of how you might incorporate Brookfield's reflective practice. And there are other similar models, but I like this one from the point of view as I might establish what my aims are for the session of what I want to be, or reflect about. I talk about the specific plans that I have. Um, there are some incidents in my teaching, so there are some key moments that I want some feedback on. Then I have a look at the feedback I get from that, analyze it, and then I look at so what by, as he puts it, determining outcomes. So how I used this was a long time ago. I taught some bridging courses at the University of Canterbury, and I was in the days when laptops had just been invented, and learners were bringing those into the classroom, and the students kept looking at their laptops, and I was really worried that they weren't actually learning anything. They were just constantly looking at their laptop and being distracted. So I had a series of questions I asked them using a critical incident method. And that was my aim. My plan was the questions. I gave them the questions, and anonymously they wrote the answers and put them at the front of the, or no, at the door basically when they walked out. And these questions were about, what moments in the session did they find enjoyable? There's a series of these questions that I use, what learning did they get? What key moments, as I said, were helpful? What moments could have been better, or what part of the lecture could have been better? What else would they like to have seen? What part of my teaching worked for them? So there's 8 questions, and I can certainly send these to you later. But they worked really well because what I got was a lot of good feedback that I could analyze and incorporate into my teaching after that. So that's Brookfield and his critical incident technique. So we're just going to move now to thinking about closing, but I just had to share another educationist's words, John Dewey. We do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. And see you're nodding your head, Natasha, you know that one. Yeah. Okay, so now I just want to look at one last slide here that reminds us about reflection to keep us growing as an adult educator. And some of you will be familiar with this kind of model of experience, reflection, look at the new ideas and then put them into practice. So how do you reflect on your teaching? What do you do? Feel free to write that into the chat. What do you do? Some of you may take time to walk and talk. Some of you may journal. Some of you may just sit and think or write down a few things. Some of you may actively talk about it with a colleague. There are a variety of ways, but I was interested in hearing from you. So feel free to write in the chat or just think about that yourself for now. What do you do as far as reflection is concerned? So we're coming to a close now. And thinking about any questions and any thoughts and reflections yourself.
Peer observation of workshops.
Thank you.
And Natasha, talk with colleagues is my preference. If not, then inner voice talking to myself.
Nice. Thanks for pointing those out. And thanks, Anna and Natasha. So again, here's another method. And I know we're just about running out of time, but again, this is a technique that I find helpful for thinking about today's session. So we've talked about feedback today, talked about peer feedback, we've talked about self-reflection. So from today's session, what will you do next? Another reflective activity. So we've had a number of ideas, a number of models, a number of reminders of information for many of you. That's the what. Then so what? What does that actually mean for you in the teaching, the training that you do? What could you improve on? Are you getting enough feedback from your learners? Are you reflecting yourself enough? So then now what? What is it you'll do as a result of talking in the breakout room or listening or reading the slides? What will you do? Again, it's a question for you to think about. I'm sorry I don't have time to hear from you all. You're welcome to write it in the chat, but what is important is that you actually do think, now what? What I've invested an hour in some professional development. How will that impact on my teaching? I'm going to close with a karakia whakamutunga, kua mutu a mātou mahi, mō tēnei wā. Manakitia mai mātou katoa, o mātou hua, o mātou whānau, ao ki te ao rangi.